I used to believe that the worst thing a person could do was lie with a straight face, but I was wrong. The worst thing is learning that the person you love most lied to you long before you ever had the chance to suspect anything. 8 months after my wedding, I learned that the marriage I thought I had walked into with open eyes had already been built on a moment I didn't know existed, a moment caught on a shaky phone camera during my wife's bachelorette party, a moment that would unwind everything I believed about trust, love, and loyalty. My wife, well, now technically my soon-to-be ex, her name is Elise. For as long as I knew her, Elise had this energy that filled a room the way a warm lamp filled the hollow corners of a dark bedroom. She wasn't loud, she wasn't overly extroverted, but she had this way of looking directly at you when she spoke, like you were the only person in a world that constantly demanded attention. I fell in love with her before I even realized it had happened. The first months of dating her were like walking around with a secret sunrise inside my chest. And even later, even after the wedding, I still believed she was the safest place I had, which is why, when everything fell apart, it didn't feel like a breakup or even betrayal. It felt like waking up after years of trusting your senses only to realize you'd been blindfolded the whole time. It started on an ordinary evening. Nothing about that day hinted that my reality was about to split open. Elise was asleep on the couch. She had one of her migraine nights. I remember the soft glow of the TV lighting up her face, the fleece blanket she always insisted on using regardless of the season, the slow rhythmic way she breathed when she fell into her deeper kind of sleep. I was cleaning out some files from our shared laptop, trying to free up space because Elise had been complaining that her editing software was freezing all week. And then, buried in a folder inside another folder inside something dated nearly a year ago, I found a subfolder named Bridesmaids Final. At first I assumed it was just photos from the bachelorette trip she'd taken with her friends. She'd gone to the coast for a weekend, rented a small beach house, and came back telling stories about board games, wine, and more laughter than should legally be allowed. I remember being happy she had such a good time because Elise didn't get to see her friends from college very often. So when I clicked on that folder, I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't even curious. I just thought I'd find a bunch of silly videos, maybe her friends singing karaoke or attempting to cook while tipsy. Instead, I found one single video file, 37 minutes long. No thumbnail preview, no description, and my heart didn't drop immediately, because it didn't know it needed to. My brain didn't scream anything, it didn't have a reason to. I clicked the video only because I wanted to see if it was something she might want me to transfer to a safer drive. I clicked without thinking. I clicked like a man who had never been betrayed. I clicked like a man who still believed he understood the woman he married. The video started with laughter. Loud, chaotic, joyful. The camera was shaky, the lighting a mess, someone's finger covering half the lens. But the audio was clear enough to tell the environment was a living room with music playing in the background. I recognized Elise's voice. She had a specific laugh that fell off at the end like a soft hiccup. I smiled without even meaning to. And then the camera shifted, showing Elise standing in the center of the room wearing a sash, holding a drink, and smiling like the entire world adored her. The first 2 minutes felt innocent. A little chaotic, but nothing alarming. Just a group of women celebrating their friend's last weekend before becoming a wife. There were jokes, playful teasing about marriage, and someone handing Elise a crown that kept sliding off her head. But then the tone shifted. It happened slowly at first, like the video itself didn't know it was about to become something different. One of her friends turned the music louder. Someone yelled, "Okay, now time for the real bachelorette fun." And the room erupted into cheers. I watched Elise laughing, shaking her head, saying something like, "Guys, no, seriously, I'm good," but she didn't look upset. Not exactly. More nervous than anything, and then the door opened, a man walked in. Tall. Muscular. Shirt half unbuttoned. The kind of man who belonged in those embarrassing party scenarios people laugh about later. Her friends screamed like a concert audience. Elise covered her face, but not in shock, not in offense. In embarrassment. Shy excitement. The camera jerked around in someone's hand trying to get a better angle. And I felt my pulse shift in a way I couldn't name. The man walked toward Elise, smiling like he had done this 1,000 times. She kept shaking her head, saying no, 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 but her hands didn't push him away. They didn't reach for another friend. They hung awkwardly at her sides, and her cheeks were flushed. I remember whispering, "Please don't," even though she couldn't hear me. Even though the moment had already happened 8 months ago. Even though nothing I said could rewrite what the camera had captured. The dancing started. The teasing. The borderline jokes. Elise wasn't touching him, not yet. She was laughing, clearly uncomfortable but not enough to leave the room. And I was still giving her the benefit of the doubt. Even then. Even while feeling that creeping coldness in my chest. Elise wasn't someone who would cross a line. At least I thought so, but 37 minutes is a long time. A lot can happen in 37 minutes. 23 minutes in, things crossed the line. Not all at once, moment by moment, like dominoes that had been waiting for the slightest push. The man sat next to her. Elise leaned away at first, but her friends pushed them closer for a photo. Elise laughed. The man put his arm around her. Elise didn't remove it. The energy in the room shifted, less silly, more something else. Something intimate in a way I hadn't expected. My stomach twisted. At minute 26, Elise whispered something into the man's ear. At minute 27, he whispered back. At minute 28, she kissed him. It wasn't a peck. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake disguised as a moment of drunken stupidity. It was intentional, slow, and devastating. I watched her hands move to his shirt. I watched her friends cheering. I watched as the camera turned away at the worst possible moment, catching only their shadows against a wall, their bodies too close. Too familiar, too deliberate. I paused the video. I paused because my chest physically hurt. I paused because my vision blurred for a moment and I couldn't tell if it was from tears or disbelief. Elise, asleep on the couch behind me, shifted slightly, adjusting her pillow. I turned and stared at her. This woman I promised my life to. This woman who held me during my father's funeral. This woman who cried happy tears when we exchanged vows. This woman who had looked at me for years as though I was her safe place. What else had I been wrong about? I forced myself to play the rest of the video. I needed to know how it ended. Needed to know if it stopped at the shadows or if there was more. The camera eventually panned back, catching Elise stumbling off the couch, fixing her hair, wiping her mouth. The man was out of frame. Her friends teased her, laughing, calling her wild for a bride, and Elise waved them off, saying that didn't happen, delete that. In a tone that didn't sound panicked. Just embarrassed. Like she'd been caught having too much fun, not caught throwing away the trust of the man who would later become her husband. The video ended with everyone singing a drunken song in the kitchen while Elise pretended to record them. And then the screen went black. I didn't know how long I sat staring at the laptop, the cursor hovering over the replay button, before I finally closed the lid. The room felt heavy. The kind of heavy that made breathing feel like dragging air through wet cement. I looked at Elise again and something inside me splintered in a way it had no hope of healing cleanly. I didn't wake her that night. I didn't confront her. I didn't even sleep. I just sat in the dark, replaying every moment of our relationship, every I love you, every soft smile, every moment I thought we were building something honest. And all of it suddenly felt edited, rearranged, curated, like I'd spent years watching the wrong cut of a movie. The truth hit me slowly, painfully, like a bruise forming beneath skin that looked completely uninjured from the outside. I didn't truly know my wife. Not the way I thought I did. Not the way a husband should, and this was only the beginning. When I opened my eyes the next morning, it felt like waking up inside someone else's life, inside a world that had cracked down the middle overnight. I lay there replaying the video, every frame burned into my mind like acid on paper. I didn't even realize I was gripping the blanket so hard that my knuckles turned white. 8 months married. 8 months thinking I had found the person I'd grow old with. 8 months living beside someone whose smile made me feel like the world was safe. And now that same smile felt like a weapon. I couldn't stay in the house. Every corner held pieces of her, the candles she liked, the coffee mugs she collected, her handwriting on the fridge telling me she loved me. My stomach twisted at the thought of those notes. So I walked. I didn't know where I was going, just that if I stopped moving, the thoughts would catch up and crush me. Eventually, my phone buzzed. It was her. "Good morning, baby. Didn't want to wake you. Breakfast is in the fridge. Can't wait to see you tonight." I almost laughed. Breakfast. Tonight. Love. The ordinary rhythm of a marriage she didn't realize had already died. My fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to type everything. I wanted to send the video in a single sentence, explain this. But betrayal does something strange to you. It teaches you caution where there used to be trust. I wasn't ready. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I confronted her. That thought alone made me sick. I shouldn't have to treat my wife like a stranger whose motives I have to study. But here I was. I went back home after hours of walking in circles. My mind felt bruised. I opened her laptop. She never hid her passwords because neither of us had anything to hide, or so I thought. I hesitated. I didn't want to become someone who snooped, someone who combed through private messages searching for answers. But she had already turned me into that person without my consent. So I opened her phone backup folder first. Photos. Screenshots. Notes. At first, everything looked normal: grocery lists, pictures of us, her coworkers at the office. Then I found the hidden folder. Not encrypted, not locked, just tucked away behind layers of random digital clutter, as if hiding something in plain sight made it invisible. When I opened it, the air left my lungs. The video from the bachelorette party was only the tip of the iceberg. There were texts between her and her maid of honor. Conversations from months before our wedding. Inside jokes about keeping secrets. References to wild nights that can never surface. My hands trembled so violently I had to sit down. It wasn't a one-time slip. It wasn't alcohol and bad decisions. It was planned. Covered. Buried. I kept scrolling, searching for something: remorse, hesitation, regret, but all I saw was acceptance. Casualness. As if betraying me was just something she lived with comfortably. I found the messages from the night of the party. They joked about what happened. They joked. My vision blurred with rage, heartbreak, humiliation. I put the laptop aside before I hurled it across the room. I needed air again. Oxygen to stop the burning behind my ribs. Later that evening, she came home. I watched her walk through the door like she hadn't just detonated the foundation of our marriage without even knowing it. She kissed me, told me she missed me, and I felt my skin crawl. How many times had she kissed me with those same lips after betraying me? She made dinner. She talked about her day. She laughed. I stared at her trying to understand how someone could live with this kind of duplicity. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until I had everything. When I messaged him, he responded within seconds. I knew this day would come. My heart pounded as he sent voice notes. He told me he had suspected things for a long time. Not just the bachelorette night, apparently, that group had a reputation. They treated loyalty like something optional. He told me he had once confronted his ex about the party traditions her friends followed. She laughed at him. Said men worry too much about things that don't matter. My stomach turned. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. If you think the video is the worst part, you're not ready for everything else. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I felt myself drift into a numbness that scared me. Over the next several days I gathered everything quietly. I downloaded every message, every picture, every file. I backed them up. I documented dates. I pieced together a timeline of betrayal. The more I uncovered, the more I realized the version of our marriage I had been living in existed only in my mind. She had sworn vows to me while hiding the truth. Smiled at me across the aisle while knowing exactly what she had done. And somehow she slept at night. But still, I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Because now I needed to know one last thing, whether the betrayal ended before the wedding. Or continued after. I prayed it wasn't the latter. I prayed there was at least a boundary. A line she hadn't crossed. But I already knew the answer before I found the evidence. My wife had a second phone. I didn't remember walking back into the house. I didn't remember closing the door behind me or sitting down on the edge of the bed. All I remembered was the sound of her voice still echoing in my head, trembling with guilt and excuses that no longer mattered. My world felt strangely quiet, like every sound had been swallowed by the weight of what she'd confessed. She didn't cheat once. She didn't make a stupid, drunken mistake, the kind she tried to pass off at first. No, she had crossed lines long before the wedding, lines I didn't even know existed until now. Her bachelorette party wasn't a one-off. It was the first time something cracked inside her, the moment she realized I would forgive anything as long as she cried hard enough afterward. And instead of facing what that meant, she let it become her pattern, her escape, her secret freedom at the cost of my sanity. I sat still, hands clasped together, staring at the floor as if the answers were hidden in the carpet fibers. My mind kept replaying every moment from the last 8 months, the nights she came home exhausted and fell asleep instantly, the weekends she claimed she needed to catch up with friends, the sudden switch to longer gym sessions, the way her phone became an extension of her hand. Everything had been right in front of me. But love doesn't let you see clearly. It lets you hope. It lets you rationalize. It lets you swallow the growing pit in your stomach because the alternative is too painful to consider. When she finally came upstairs, her face red and blotchy from crying, she sat beside me without saying a word. The silence between us stretched so far it felt like a canyon. After a moment she whispered, "Please say something." I didn't turn my head. "How long have you been lying to me?" I asked softly, though my voice felt like it belonged to someone else. She hesitated, which told me everything before she even spoke. Since before the wedding," she said. "Since the engagement?" "Yes." "Since we moved in together?" "Yes." My jaw locked. "Since the night you told me I was the best thing that ever happened to you?" She swallowed hard. "Yes." Something inside me cracked, but it didn't explode. It just broke quietly, like a hairline fracture finally giving under pressure. She reached for my hand, but I moved it away. For the first time since this nightmare started, she seemed to truly understand the magnitude of what she'd done. She wasn't losing a fight or an argument. She was losing me, she tried to explain, stumbling through reasons, her insecurities, her fear of commitment, her need for validation, the thrill of being wanted by someone who wasn't supposed to want her. None of it softened anything. None of it could. She finally whispered, "I didn't think it would matter once we got married. I thought I could bury it." "You buried me," I said. "Not the mistake." She sobbed again, curling forward as if she could shield herself from the truth. But I couldn't comfort her, not anymore. I wasn't her safe place. I wasn't her anchor. I was collateral damage in her journey to find excitement she didn't deserve. We slept in separate rooms that night, not that either of us really slept. At sunrise, I walked downstairs and found her sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten breakfast the day after our wedding, laughing about how badly we danced at the reception. She looked up, eyes swollen, and whispered, "Please don't leave." There was a desperation in her voice I had never heard before, something raw and unfiltered. For a moment I hesitated, not because I wanted to stay, but because part of me couldn't believe this was my life now. She crossed the room slowly and placed something in my hand, her wedding ring. "If you walk out," she said, "I'll understand. But if there's even one part of you that wants to try, I'll do anything. Therapy. Counseling. Total transparency. Anything." I stared at the ring, the symbol of a promise she shattered before it even began. "Why did you marry me?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Because I loved you," she whispered. "Because I still love you." "People don't destroy what they love," I said. She shook her head frantically. "I destroyed myself. I'm trying to fix it. Please let me." I closed my fist around the ring and walked past her, stepping outside into the cold air. For the next few days, we barely spoke. She tried giving me space, though sometimes she hovered near the doorway, as if making sure I didn't disappear for good. I spent hours replaying everything she had said, everything she had admitted, everything she had done. She didn't ask me to forgive her overnight. She simply asked me to try to understand her brokenness. But understanding didn't heal betrayal. Understanding didn't erase humiliation. Understanding didn't fix trust. Nothing did. Around the 5th day, she handed me a notebook filled with handwritten pages, therapy notes she had started on her own, confessions, explanations she couldn't speak out loud without breaking down. She had written about her childhood insecurities, her past relationships, her self-destructive habits, her fear that she wasn't good enough for me, and her twisted way of creating chaos before someone else could hurt her. It was strange reading intimate pieces of her mind I had never known existed. It made me realize something I didn't expect. I had married someone who desperately wanted love but didn't know how to let herself feel worthy of it. It didn't excuse anything, but it made the situation more complex than simple betrayal. She noticed when I finished reading and came to sit beside me. "I know it doesn't fix anything," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be honest now. Really honest." "You should have been honest from the start," I said, though my voice didn't carry the earlier anger, only exhaustion. "I know," she said softly. "And I wish I could go back and undo everything I ruined. But I can't. I can only ask you one thing. Can we rebuild something new? Even if it takes years?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who wasn't trying to manipulate me anymore. She wasn't trying to justify or minimize. She was standing in the ruins waiting to see if I would help rebuild or leave her behind. I didn't answer that night. Or the next. Healing wasn't linear. My emotions swung wildly: anger, numbness, reluctant empathy, heartbreak, resentment, longing. Every day I woke up wondering if I should stay or walk away. Every night I fell asleep wondering the same thing. But slowly, painfully, I noticed changes in her. She deleted social media accounts linked to the people from her past. She installed transparency apps without me even asking. She started therapy twice a week. She apologized constantly, not to earn forgiveness, but to acknowledge the pain she had caused. She showed up. Every day. And somewhere deep in the tangled mess of emotion, I realized something important. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I also wasn't ready to lose her. The turning point came unexpectedly one evening when we were sitting outside watching the sunset. She sat beside me quietly, giving me space the way she learned to, until suddenly she said, "You can leave me one day. I'll accept it. But I need you to know something before that happens." I turned to her. Her voice was steady for the first time in weeks. "I don't deserve your love, but I'm going to spend every day trying to be someone who does," she said. "Whether you stay or go. I want to be better than the version of myself who hurt you." Something inside me softened, not because she said the right words, but because they weren't rehearsed. They weren't desperate. They were real. We talked for hours, about boundaries, expectations, trust, pain, fear, and what rebuilding actually meant. And for the first time, I saw a future where healing was possible, not guaranteed, not easy, but possible. Reconciliation wasn't a magical moment. It was a slow, fragile decision. And eventually, I made it. We didn't pretend things were okay. We didn't act like love alone would save us. We agreed to rebuild brick by brick, even if it meant rebuilding a completely different relationship than the one we started with. We went to therapy together. We dissected every uncomfortable truth. We faced the guilt, the shame, the tears. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the resentment began to loosen its grip. Trust didn't return in a wave. It returned in drops. But drops accumulate. 8 months later, we weren't the same couple. But maybe that was the point. We weren't trying to go back, we were trying to move forward. People always ask whether a relationship can survive betrayal. The truth? It depends. It depends on accountability. It depends on healing. It depends on whether both people are willing to confront the ugliest parts of themselves. It depends on whether the foundation can be rebuilt stronger than before. In our case, the answer wasn't clear-cut. We didn't live in a fairy tale. We lived in reality. A messy, painful, honest reality. But we chose each other anyway. And sometimes, that choice is enough.